This is A Closer Look, a program about being differently abled in the 21st century, produced by the Community Council on Disability Awareness.
The Community Council on Disability Awareness of East Central Indiana is a grassroots, not-for-profit organization composed of citizens with disabilities and representatives from community agencies that serve those with disabilities. And now here's our host, Dr. Daryl Green.
Thank you for tuning in to WCTV. It's great to have you with us for another episode of A Closer Look. And today I'd like to introduce you to my most interesting and amazing guest, Jana Schroeder. Jana is totally blind, yet she has full-time employment at Earlham College and runs their Bonner Scholar program. So with that in mind, I'd like to welcome you to the show, Jana.
Thank you for having me, Daryl.
I've known you for a number of years, and you've always impressed me with the things that you're able to do and the responsibilities you're able to shoulder at Earlham College. With that in mind, can you share with our viewers where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born outside of Dayton, Ohio, and grew up there near Vandalia. We lived outside of the town, so in the country, so there were not, it was not close to schools or anything within walking distance. I had to ride the school bus, and I enjoyed growing up there. Lived there all my life, but I knew that as a blind person, I was going to have to find a place to live when I was an adult where I would have sidewalks and easier access to things than where we lived outside of town.
So you grew up outside Dayton, and what caused your vision loss?
My mother, when she was pregnant with me, had a mild case of rubella or German measles, and so she wasn't even aware that she had been sick, but it affected my eyes and their development. So I had a number of different problems with my eyes, that cataracts, scarred corneas, and each one of those things are things that sometimes can be corrected for people, but with all the different things that were going on, there was nothing that could be done to improve my vision.
So there were no surgeries or reconstructive options, and just better glasses wasn't going to do the trick.
Right, glasses didn't help me at all.
So how did your parents first realize that you had a vision problem?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think that it was just a matter of, as I was getting old enough, I started walking a little later and doing some things, and I think they started realizing that I wasn't really tracking things with my eyes that other kids would do, and wasn't really picking up on things that other kids see things and observe them and learn to do them. So I think I might have been a year or two old before they really realized there might be something, and had the doctors look more closely at things.
Right. So did you have light perception when you were born?
Right. Until I was out of high school, I could actually see large shapes and colors. I could never see well enough to read large print, but I could see letters if they were written in a dark color and were really big. But, so when I was reading picture books or when I was looking at picture books as a little child, I could see some of the letters and things when they were really big. But pretty soon in first and second grade, you start getting less pictures and more words, and the words start getting smaller. And I never could read anything that was that small, but I could see, like I said, colors and just kind of shapes of things.
And now do you still have light perception?
No, I don't see at all. Nothing.
All right. So did you go to the state school for the blind, or were you going to regular community school?
Well, I was fortunate when I was growing up. Dayton was one of the earlier communities to have a mainstreamed kind of situation for blind students. Starting in the 1950s, they had a program where there was a public school that blind students from all over that area could go there. And most of the day we were in a classroom, a regular classroom setting, but for part of the day we went to a classroom where there were teachers who knew how to use braille and other adaptive things that we would need to know, and they taught us some of those skills. So I didn't have to go and live away from my family. If I had gone to the State School for the Blind in Ohio, that's in Columbus, so I would have been living away from home from an early age. So it was nice that I was able to do that, and also that my mom was able to take me, she had to take me to that school every day, drive me back and forth into Dayton. It was about half hour or so each way to go there. But that helped me get a good foundation. And then after third grade, I started going to the schools in my own town of Vandalia, and was able to have a teacher come once or twice a week who brought me books and transcribed materials into Braille that I needed to read, and also worked with me on skills. I started typing in fourth grade because I needed to be able to type my assignments, answers to my homework questions and tests and things like that for my teachers. So I started learning some of those skills at a
Because handwriting was going to be difficult.
Right. No, I never could write legibly.
All right. So you went to, at first, a segregated classroom with other blind students, and then you were mainstreamed with a special ed teacher coming in for special training. And you learned how to read by reading Braille?
That's right. So a lot of times people see me reading Braille and they want to know, is that hard to read? How long did it take you to learn how to read? And I say, well, how long did it take you to learn how to read? Because I think that's a difficult question to answer. I was just learning to read Braille as anybody else would learn to read print. And so, you know, at what point do you say, I've now learned how to read? Is it when you know the alphabet, or when you can read words or sentences, or, you know, when you can read at a certain level? So, but that was my whole experience of learning to read. And so I was, you know, it was never a big deal to me. I became very fast and fluent in reading Braille just because that was what I was used to, and I really liked reading. I liked stories, so I did a lot of reading and got a lot of good practice that way.
Right. And you graduated from high school?
Yes.
And were you able to go on to college?
Yes, and that's how I got over here to Richmond. I attended Earlham College, actually. I had one of my high school guidance counselors suggested that I might like Earlham, and so I came over here, and I did like it because it was small. I felt like people were friendly, and that it would be an easy enough campus. I know that there are blind people who go to big campuses like, you know, Indiana University or Ohio State, but I couldn't quite imagine at that point in time. I hadn't had enough training and, you know, getting around independently, crossing streets, doing all that kind of thing. So it was nice to go to a campus that was all self-contained and there wasn't really traffic or anything like that. I just had to learn my way around a campus, but that was pretty easy because it was small. And I had someone come before classes started. Somebody came with me and helped me learn my way around campus and where different buildings would be. And then I just had to keep practicing that. And
Right. So you had a little bit of orientation, but what did you study as a student at Earlham?
I had two majors, history and sociology, anthropology were my majors. And so both of those were very reading intensive classes and writing intensive. And when I started college, I'd been lucky enough in high school to have a lot of my books in Braille. But when I got to college, I found out that almost nothing would be available in Braille, and so I started using cassette tape books. And then I also had readers, students who were work study students who were hired to help me go to the library with me to do research, and I would direct them, what books I wanted to, or, they would look up titles, and I would say, yes, I want to, find that book or that article, and we would read it, and sometimes I would tape it or take notes on it as they read. But that was really how I did everything. I had to type all of my papers and tests and things. And
Now, our viewers may not know, but I'm also legally blind. And I went to college the same way you did. My books were on reel-to-reel tape. And later on, they were on little cassette tapes. And I also had reader service. But that's an awful slow way to get your reading done, isn't it?
it can be, and you always have to worry if the tape would get broken or tangled. That could really ruin you being able to finish your
tape
assignment.
is you can turn it up and it sounds like chipmunks, but you get through the material faster.
Well, you can make it go faster, yeah. I would do that a little bit, but I was never one of the people who read really, really fast. I kind of went slower, and I took a lot of notes in Braille because that was really my preferred method of reading, and so I would have big stacks of notes that I had taken in Braille about things I was listening to.
Right. So after you got through college, were you able to find employment? What are some of the jobs that you've had?
Well, yeah, it took me a while after college. It was challenging to find employment because a lot of people were not quite sure, what kind of jobs I would be able to do as a blind person. But I did do some volunteer work, and that helped me to be able to say that I had skills and that I had used them in a work setting. But the first full-time job that I got was working with a United Way agency in Dayton. I went back to Dayton and was living there, and this agency matched up volunteers to visit and write to people who were in prison who didn't have family members on the outside who were in contact with them. So it was a way to keep them involved in the community, because studies show that people have a much lower recidivism rate if they maintain some ties with someone in the community, the free world, while they're incarcerated. So I did that for almost 3 years. The interesting thing about that job was that I almost didn't get it, but fortunately the person who became my boss decided to interview me. The board of that organization was not interested in interviewing me because they said one of the requirements was to have a driver's license. And I honestly, said in my application that I didn't have a driver's license, but that I knew that I could find ways to get around, that I used public transportation in the city, or that I would find volunteers to take me places I needed to go. And fortunately, my boss had actually been involved with independent living. He was on the board of an independent living center in Dayton, and so he knew about people with disabilities, and he decided to take a second look and thought that my credentials were good, and he wanted to interview me anyway, and then hired me. So I was really lucky.
So he gave you the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And so you began to build a career path. And you had other jobs before you arrived at Earlham?
Yes, I have one other. So I did the first job for about 3 years, and then I went to the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker organization, and I worked in their Dayton office with the Ohio Criminal Justice Program, and I did that for a number of years, and then I came here to Richmond.
And you've been at Earlham for 7 years?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Now, tell us briefly, what is the Bonner Scholar Program?
So I have the privilege of working with 60 really amazing students at Earlham. These are students who are interested in being involved in the community, want to do volunteer work, and they also are students who have a high level of financial need to make it possible for them to go to college. So the Bonner Scholars Program provides a scholarship to those students that allows them to come to Earlham and study, and instead of having a work-study job on campus where they might be working in the library or in the cafeteria, they are actually working in the community doing volunteer work with nonprofits or in the schools or with city government, and they have to do that 10 hours a week, and I work with those 60 students to help them develop throughout their time at Earlham and to learn skills and to really understand more about nonprofits and designing projects and managing a work that they might be doing. And it's a great opportunity to do that. And I love that, getting to work with the students because they all have such different interests and backgrounds and things that they bring. But it's also a time, the reason I was interested in the job was that when I was a college student, that was a time of a lot of exploration and discovery and learning for me. And so I know what an interesting time of life that is for young people, and I just love being part of that with them.
So the Bonner Scholar Program is sort of like work study, except that the student receives a scholarship, like $1,500 towards tuition in return for their volunteer hours.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And if a viewer is associated with a nonprofit in Richmond or the surrounding area, they could contact you and find out how to go about getting a Bonner Scholar?
Yes, that's right. We have a number of agencies we already work with, but if there's somebody out there who is not familiar with the Bonner Scholars, there are certain requirements, but I'd be happy to talk with people about those and work with them. Also, the students, if they're high school students or other people who are interested, this is open to anybody who applies to Earlham College. And like I said, there's some criteria around financial need that I could share with folks, but it's an opportunity that they could apply for. And if we accept 15 new students each year as they come into the college, and this program operates in a number of different campuses. The Bonner Foundation, which provides the funding for the program, is based in Princeton, New Jersey, and they have there are about 25 campuses that have Bonner Scholar programs all over the country.
And real quick, outside of work, what are some of the things you like to do that you'd consider maybe hobbies?
Well, I don't have a whole lot of time right now because I'm getting my master's degree, but when I do have time, I like to read. I like to attend concerts, plays, things like that. I like to travel if I can, and I've been to England twice and to France and Canada, California. I just like to see new places,
get
be new
around
places.
and seeing them without seeing them, but
Right.
experiencing them with all the other senses
Right.
you have.
Right.
All right. And what are some other things that you're involved in the community?
Well, I am on the board of the Independent Living Center of East Central Indiana, and that's an organization that works with people with any type of disability. They provide services and supports so that people with disabilities can live independent lives, be in their own homes, and do the things that they want to do. And I really believe in that cause, and so I'm part of that board of directors.
So you're on that board too.
Yeah.
Now, what are some things that, through your experience, you notice that people think that blind people can't do, that you can do, and most blind people can do if they get
Right.
some training?
Right. Well, there are a lot of those, and I've gone out and done things with kids before, and they will, wonder, how do I do things like, wash my dishes, or, and to me that doesn't, I'll say, well, why would I not be able to wash my dishes? What do you do when you're washing dishes? You have to touch it with your hands anyway to wash it, right? So you can feel if there's still food on there or whatever. Cooking, things like that. Often people think, oh, you can't cook, you can't cut things with a knife. But a lot of things that you can do that you're using your hands for is, it's really not that big of a problem for a blind person to do. Getting around in airports, there are assistants who will help you. And so it's a lot easier to get around in an airport than it is, say, in a Greyhound bus station where there aren't necessarily helpers. So there are a lot of things that people think, oh, surely you can't go, take a trip by yourself and fly somewhere. And it's like, why not? I would get assistance, and then I would say I need a cab, and they would help me find a cab, and the cab would take me where I need to go, and it's really not a problem.
Right. And I noticed that you walk with a blind cane, so you've had training on how to get around with that.
Yes, I've had training for orientation and mobility, so using the long cane to tell, if there are obstacles or steps or things like that in front of me, but also just orientation training helps you learn how to use listening to cues, listening to the traffic flow, to know when it's safe to cross a street, things like that.
Right. And now, what are some words of encouragement that you would have for people watching the show that might have vision problems?
Well, I think that really the important thing to remember is that if there's something you want to do and you want to do it badly enough, you'll probably be able to figure out a way to do it. And I know blind people who do all kinds of things like mow their own lawns or have a garden or work with woodworking tools or whatever. And those are all things that I couldn't do and I might be scared to do, but I don't really want to do them. But if I really, if that was me and that's what I wanted to do, I'm sure that I would figure out a way to do it, or I could find somebody out there who could tell me how they've figured out how to do it. So I really just encourage blind people, especially people who lose their vision and maybe think, oh, now I'm not going to be able to do these things that I did when I could see, that there are probably people out there doing things that you would be surprised and that you could learn if you just get to know other blind people and find people who can do the things you want to do and learn from them.
That's right. And with that in mind, I want to thank you, Jana, for being on the show. You're an inspiration to me personally, and I believe to everyone who knows you. And you're bright, you're intelligent, you're able to maintain full-time employment. You're involved with students, shaping their lives in a profound way, and they're also involved in the Independent Living Center and contributing back to the community in that way. And you're very well integrated and organized and just a wonderful person. And with that in mind, I would want you to remember what Jana said. If you've lost some of your vision, anything that you could do before you lost your vision, you probably could do again. You might need to get some training. There are lots of resources and accessible technologies today. We could have a whole show on that sometime. But if you lost your vision, call the Independent Center, get some support, and you'll be surprised all the wonderful things that you could do, except drive.
Right.
And with that in mind, keep looking out, and God bless.
A Closer Look, a program about being differently abled in the 21st century, produced by the Community Council on Disability Awareness.
The Community Council on Disability Awareness of East Central Indiana is a grassroots, not-for-profit organization composed of citizens with disabilities and representatives from community agencies that serve those with disabilities. Our meetings are open to the public, and we invite you to join us in our work. Our mission is to promote opportunity, acceptance, respect, and independence, leading to full community inclusion for all persons with disabilities. On behalf of individuals living with blindness, deafness, physical disabilities, chronic diseases, mental illness, cognitive and learning disabilities, and their families, the CCDA strives to challenge attitudes of prejudice and discrimination, identify and remove barriers to accessible and inclusion, educate the community about difficulties we face, inform the community about services and opportunities that are available, organize conferences to empower those living with disabilities. We also celebrate the accomplishments of the differently abled and those who work with and support them through our annual awards banquet. If you know a disabled student, teacher, employee, artist, or volunteer, or if you know a student, teacher, employer, medical service provider, or volunteer who does outstanding work with the disabled, and you believe they deserve recognition from the community, contact our president, Cynthia Warren. On July 26, 2010, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the renewal of Americans with Disabilities Act. We appreciate the tremendous improvements local cities and businesses have made to serve the needs of disabled citizens and customers and their efforts to provide designated handicap parking spots, curb cuts, accessible doors, and accessible restrooms. We call on all businesses and institutions to continue to make such improvements, and we stand ready to assist them in evaluating and designing further improvements that are required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Thank you for tuning in to WGTV for our show. Through a closer look, the CCDA seeks to highlight and celebrate the character, courage, perseverance, vitality, and service to the community and accomplishments of individuals living with disabilities in Wayne County. To learn more about the CCDA, to join our organization, or to meet our host, Dr. Daryl Green, and his guests for this show, you are invited to attend our public showing of this interview by the School of Social Work at IU East.